2 Kings chapter 11. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her... So this goes back a bit. So now we went ahead with the story with Jehu. Now we're going back a bit. We're down in the southern kingdom again, where Athaliah is still around. Athaliah is the daughter of Ahab and the wife of Jehoram, king of Judah. She was the mother of Ahaziah, when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, he was the one who got killed in Jehu's coup, she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family. Now, we read about Jehoram doing this. Actually, let's go in 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles, we read about this a moment ago, but 2 Chronicles 21, verse 2. 2 Chronicles 21, 2. Jehoram's brothers, the sons of Jehoshaphat, were a bunch of names. All these were the sons of Jehoshaphat. A few verses later, when Jehoram established himself firmly over his father's kingdom, he put all his brothers to the sword, along with some of the princes of Israel. His wife was Athaliah. So she is following her late husband's example here and is wiping out all threats to her throne. Oh, they would all be young, by the way. Because Jehoram had already cleaned house just a few years earlier, Jehoram, this king of Judah, reigned 8 years. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned Jerusalem 8 years. So he had already wiped out most of his rivals 8 or 9 years ago now. So whatever rivals, whatever possible male claimants to the throne there were at this point in time would have probably all been young. Okay, because Jehoram would have already got, unless there were a few that he missed, they would have all been children, because Jehoram just did a house cleaning operation 8 or 9 years earlier. So Athaliah, who's, by the way, not a member of the royal, she married into it, but she's not a blood member of the royal family. So she's not a legitimate member of this line of royalty. She was born into the royal family of Israel, daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. She married into the royal family of Judah, but she is in no way, shape, or form a legitimate member of the line of David. So she sees an opportunity here to become sole ruler over Judah, because her 22-year-old son, he himself was a young man. He was 22 when he died, or when he became king, reigned a year, died, I guess, at 23, and she was dominating him even during his brief reign as king. And he was 23. So all the other royal princes at this point would have been very young, most likely. And so she sees an opportunity here, and because none of them would have been strong enough to fight her off. So she sees an opportunity here and kills them all. Now, if she had killed them all, if she had managed to get every single one of them, there'd be no line of David. How do you get from David to Jesus Christ if there is no line any longer? So this is as close as the forces of evil ever came to winning the battle against God. It's all going to come down to one tiny infant here that Athaliah misses in her purge of the royal family. She set out to destroy she proceeded to destroy the whole royal family. But Jehoshoba, daughter of King Jehoram, so she's also a princess, and sister of Ahaziah, daughter of King Jehoram, and sister, that's the previous king of Judah. Again, these names get so confusing because we're repeating the same names of different people. This would have been Judah's king Jehoram, who was the son of Jehoshaphat. So this is his daughter, sister of Ahaziah, the 22-year-old king who reigned for a year. I'm guessing she's also the daughter of Athaliah. I'm guessing, if she's a sister of Ahaziah, and Ahaziah was unless she's a half-sister of Athaliah, Ahaziah, which is possible. She could have been the daughter of some other wife or concubine of Jehoram. It's possible. It doesn't actually say. We really don't know. But at any rate, she's a member of the royal family too. This priestess's wife. She's the wife of the high priest, daughter of the king, daughter of the late king, sister of the current king, wife of the high priest. So she's upper class. I mean, she's way up there at the top of the social ladder. So Jehoshoba, daughter of King Jehoram and sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered. She put him and his nurse in a bedroom to hide him from Athaliah so that he was not killed. He remained hidden with his nurse at the temple of the Lord for 6 years while Athaliah ruled the land. So this little baby is the only one left. The only seed. That goes all the way back. By the way, that goes all the way back to Genesis 3:15. When God says to the woman, or actually God says to the serpent about the woman, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and he will strike his heel. Okay, Moses didn't know this. I don't think the writer of Kings is aware of this, but as we'll find out as the story goes on, we're tracing that development of that seed line promise all the way to the days of Christ, who will end up being that seed, the fulfillment of that seed promise. There is both a plural and a singular sense here of this enmity between your offspring and hers. Because the offspring of the serpent, the ones who do the devil's work, will be enemies of those who do the good work of God, through Eve here, kind of personified here. But there's also a singular seed who's going to come along and destroy the serpent, crush its head. And at this point in time, in the days of Athaliah, it's down to one person. There is one child left, an infant, a 1-year-old infant, who is still alive and being cared for by the high priest and his wife, hidden in the temple, away from Athaliah, who will kill him if she finds him. This is as close as the forces of evil ever came to stopping the plans of God from fruition, because there's one kid left, one person left, carrying this seed line promise along. If this seed line is wiped out, God's promises are null and void, because he said it was going to happen through that seed line. You can't just start up another seed line when you promise it's going to be through this one. Back in the days when he made the covenant with Abraham in Genesis 15, he binds himself to keeping that covenant. If he were not to keep the covenant, he had to destroy himself, as by the terms of that covenant condition. He kept the covenant, so he didn't destroy himself. But that's how serious that covenant was. He wanted Israel to take it that seriously, too. Israel didn't keep that covenant. But Israel also wasn't required. Abraham didn't pass through the pieces, if you're studying most of that time. God did not make Abraham pass through the pieces, and did not bind him to the covenant in the same way that God bound himself to that covenant. So God still has a lamp for David, even though it's down to basically a tiny flicker. There's one infant child out there who is still carrying this lamp around. But there is one. In the 7th year, Jehoiada sent for the commanders of units of 100, the Kerites and the guards, and had them brought to him at the temple of the Lord. He made a covenant with them, and put them under an oath at the temple of the Lord, probably in the name of the Lord, I'm sure. Then he showed them the king's sons. This is a 7-year-old boy he's bringing out of hiding. I'm guessing he's been in hiding this whole time. Nobody has known who he was, because if they did, Athaliah would find out and she'd kill him. So they've had this kid in hiding for the last 6 years. He's only 7 years old, so he's not going to be doing any of this himself. I guess Jehoiada decided that 6 years was enough. He couldn't wait any longer. In the long run, this may have been a mistake, because this kid is going to actually turn out to be bad in the end, in the long run. But I guess they figured that 6 years of being ruled by a wicked woman is just too much. They can't handle anymore. Athaliah does not seem to have been a very strong ruler. At least she didn't have a lot of support. The people were ready to get rid of her as soon as they possibly could. So I guess he just figured it was time, even though the child was only 7 years old. He made a covenant with them, and so then he showed them the king's son. He commanded them, saying, "This is what you are to do. You who are in the 3 companies that are going on duty at the Sabbath, a third of you guarding the royal palace, a third at the gate, and a third at the gate behind the guard, who take turns guarding the temple. And you who are in the other 2 companies that normally go off Sabbath duty are all to guard the temple for the king. Station yourselves around the king, each man with his weapon in his hand. Anyone who approaches your ranks must be put to death. Stay close to the king wherever he goes. They're going to be bodyguards to this little 7-year-old kid. This 7-year-old kid is not going to be able to fight for himself. These men are going to have to do it for him. And they've got to take this matter seriously. Because literally the entire weight of the world is on this kid's shoulders. Because if he dies, the promise ends. Now, Jehoiada doesn't know that as much. Jehoiada knows that if this kid dies, the royal seed line ends. There's no son of David left. So that's serious enough. But even Jehoiada doesn't realize how serious the situation is. Because if this kid dies, God's entire promise to the woman, or promise about the woman, or to the serpent, guaranteed to the serpent back in Genesis 3, becomes null and void because the seed line is finished. So everything is on keeping this kid alive. The commanders of units of 100 did just as Jehoiada the priest ordered. Each one took his men, those who were going on duty on the Sabbath and those who were going off duty, and came to Jehoiada the priest. Then he gave the commanders the spears and shields that had belonged to King David and that were in the temple of the Lord. These would be 150 plus years old at this point. These have been there for a long time. The guards, each with his weapon in his hand, stationed themselves around the king, near the altar and the temple, from the south side and the north side of the temple. Jehoiada brought out the king's son and put the crown on him. He presented him with a copy of the covenant. Remember that? Remember way back in Deuteronomy, when we talked about the days to come when they were going to have a king? At the time, they didn't have a king. And for several hundred years thereafter, they didn't have a king. But Deuteronomy 17, it says, when you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, take possession of it, and you get a king. In verse 18, Deuteronomy 17:18, when he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself on a scroll a copy of this law, taken from that of the priests or Levites. It is to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God and follow carefully all the words of this law and these decrees, and not consider himself better than his brothers, and turn from the law to the right or to the left. Then he and his descendants will reign a long time over his kingdom in Israel. So each king is supposed to have his own personal copy of the law. So Jehoiada is presenting such a thing now. I doubt Joash wrote it himself since he's 7 years old. But Jehoiada is presenting him a copy of the covenant and proclaimed him king. They anointed him, and the people clapped their hands and shouted, "Long live the king!" When Athaliah heard the noise made by the guards and the people, she went to the people at the entrance of the Lord. She looked, and there was the king, standing by the pillar as the custom was. So apparently the customary place to anoint a king was by a pillar, one of those pillars in the temple court entrance. The officers and the trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets. Then Athaliah tore her robes and called out, "Treason! Treason!" Jehoiada the priest ordered the commanders of units of 100, who were in charge of the troops, "Bring her out between the ranks, and put to the sword anyone who follows her." For the priest had said, she must not be put to death in the temple of the Lord. So they seized her as she reached the place where the horses enter the palace grounds, and there she was put to death. That's it. Apparently there was no real battle or no real fight. Nobody was really supporting Athaliah by this point. None of them really wanted to be ruled by a woman, especially a wicked woman who was not a descendant of the line of David. No, none of them wanted that. That was just too much to bear for any of these people. Jehoiada then made a covenant between the Lord and the king and people that they would be the Lord's people. He also made a covenant between the king and the people. All the people of the land went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. There was one in Israel that Jehu's guys tore down, or he got the ministers of Baal to be killed, and then they tore it down. There's one in Judah as well they're getting rid of now. They smashed the altars and idols to pieces and killed Matan, the priest of Baal, in front of the altars. Then Jehoiada the priest posted guard at the temple of the Lord. He took with him the commanders of hundreds, the Karites. I don't know what a Karite is. Some foreign mercenary unit, I guess. I don't know. The guards and the people of the land. And together they brought the king down from the temple of the Lord and went into the palace, entering by the way of the gate of the guards. The king, again a 7-year-old boy, then took his place on the royal throne, and all the people of the land rejoiced. And the city was quiet, because Athaliah had been slain with the sword at the palace. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign. Now for this Chronicles account of this period of time. Well, let's back to 2 Chronicles 22, verse 7. Through Ahaziah's visit to Joram, this is back when he went to visit him in Jezreel after they went to battle together at Ramoth Gilead, and Jehoram was wounded, retreated to Jezreel, and Ahaziah goes there with him. So through that visit, God brought about Ahaziah's downfall. When Ahaziah arrived, he went out with Jehoram to meet Jehu, son of Nimshi, whom the Lord had anointed to destroy the house of Ahab. Now Jehu is the king of Israel, and the chronicler is not particularly concerned with the kingdom of Israel any longer, so he's not going to give us an account of Jehu, but he is going to mention him here as having wiped out this king of Judah. While Jehu was executing judgment on the house of Ahab, he found the princes of Judah and the sons of Ahaziah's relatives who had been attending Ahaziah, and he killed them. That was what we read about, the 42 men he happened to come across. We read about that in Kings. He then went in search of Ahaziah, and his men captured him while he was hiding in Samaria. He was brought to Jehu and put to death. They buried him, for they said, he was a son of Jehoshaphat, who sought the Lord with all his heart. Ahaziah did not seek the Lord with all his heart, but Jehoshaphat did. So there was no one in the house of Ahaziah powerful enough to retain the kingdom. I said it earlier, they would have all been too young, basically. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy the royal family of the house of Judah. But Jehoshoba, the daughter of King Jehoram, took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the royal princes who were about to be murdered, and put him and his nurse in a bedroom. Because Jehoshoba, the daughter of King Jehoram, and wife of the priest Jehoiada, was Ahaziah's sister, she hid the child from Athaliah so that she could not kill him. He remained hidden with them at the temple of God for 6 years, while Athaliah ruled the land. In the 7th year, Jehoiada showed his strength. He made a covenant with the commanders of units of 100, Azariah, son of Jehoram, Ishmael, I don't think that's King Jehoram, I don't imagine it could be, but just some random other guys with those same names, Ishmael, son of Johanan, Azariah, son of Obed, Messiah, son of Adiah, and Elishaphat, son of Zichri. They went throughout Judah and gathered the Levites and the heads of Israelite families from all the towns. When they came to Jerusalem, the whole assembly made a covenant with the king at the temple of God. Jehoiada said to them, the king's son shall reign, as the Lord promised concerning the descendants of David. Now this is what you are to do. A third of you priests and Levites who are going on duty at the Sabbath are to keep watch at the doors. A third of you are at the royal palace, and a third at the foundation gate, and all the other men are to be in the courtyards of the temple of the Lord. No one is to enter the temple of the Lord except the priests and Levites who are on duty. Remember, when they set up this temple system, and when David was planning it back in the day, even before they built it, he had this system of duties, these divisions that were going to be on duties for a couple weeks at a time. So that's what they're following here. The people who are on duty are supposed to act like they're on duty, but they're going to go in and get armed and come back out and be ready to fight, and as they proclaim this boy king. No one is to enter the temple of the Lord except the priests and Levites who are on duty. They may enter because they are consecrated, but all the other men are to guard what the Lord has assigned to them. The Levites are to station themselves around the king, each man with his weapons in his hands. Anyone who enters the temple must be put to death. Stay close to the king wherever he goes. The Levites and all the men of Judah did just as Jehoiada the priest ordered. Each one took his men, those who were going on duty on the Sabbath and those who were going off duty. For Jehoiada the priest had not released any of the divisions, so they're all supposed to act like it's normal, like everything is operating normally. By the way, the fact that the temple is still standing and still operating is an indication that Athaliah was not powerful enough to have it shut down. Some of the kings will. Some of the rotten kings of Judah that are to come are going to actually shut down the temple for periods of time. So Athaliah didn't have enough influence to be able to do that at this point, because clearly the priests and Levites are going in and out of their business. In fact, they're basically told to go in and out as though nothing is unusual. Everything is operating normally here. Then he gave the commanders of units of 100 the spears and the large and small shields that had belonged to King David and that were in the temple of God. He stationed all the men, each with his weapon in his hand, around the king, near the altar and the temple, from the south side to the north side of the temple. Jehoiada and his sons brought out, so he's not the only one, he has his own sons with him, brought out the king's son and put the crown on him. They presented him with a copy of the covenant and proclaimed him king. They anointed him and shouted, "Long live the king!" When Athaliah heard the noise of the people running and cheering the king, she went to them at the temple of the Lord. She looked, and there was the king standing by the pillar at his pillar at the entrance. Now, obviously, she didn't know this kid was still around. Otherwise, she would have been looking for him to try to kill him all these years. He was in the temple the whole time, apparently, or around the temple. So it's not like he was out in some little village, some hidden farm community in the outskirts of the kingdom somewhere. He was right there in the city, in the temple, not far from Athaliah herself. So clearly, she didn't know anything about him. And also clearly, she didn't have enough influence to have the temple's proceedings shut down during her time as queen. Usurper. So she looked, and there was the king standing by the pillar at the entrance. The officers and the trumpeters were beside the king, and all the people of the land were rejoicing and blowing trumpets, and singing with musical instruments, and singers with musical instruments were leading the praises. Then Athaliah tore her robes and shouted, "Treason! Treason!" Actually, this is very much not treason. There's one person here who's committed treason, and it's Athaliah. Jehoiada the priest sent out the commanders of units of 100, who were in charge of the troops, and said to them, "Bring her out between the ranks, and put to the sword anyone who follows her." For the priest had said, "Do not put her to death, the temple of the Lord." So they seized her as she reached the entrance of the horse gate on the palace grounds, and there they put her to death. Does this mean she's trying to get to a horse to run away? I'm not entirely sure. At any rate, they got her and she's dead. Jehoiada then made a covenant that he and the people, that's, by the way, that's the end of Ahab. Okay, we've gotten rid of Jehoiada, we've gotten rid of Jezebel, we've gotten rid of Athaliah. Ahab's house is finally done. We have finally gotten rid of them. Jehoiada then made a covenant that he and the people and the king would be the Lord's people. All the people went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and idols and killed Mattan the priest of Baal in front of the altars. Then Jehoiada placed the oversight of the temple of the Lord in the hands of the priests who were Levites, to whom David had made assignments in the temple, to present the burnt offerings of the Lord as written in the law of Moses, with rejoicing and singing as David had ordained. So their worship system at this point was a combination of the law of Moses and the sacrifices and rituals as laid down by Moses, as well as this order of worship service as ordained by David. So those two things together are now governing their official worship services at the temple. He also stationed doorkeepers at the gates of the Lord's temple, so that no one who was in any way unclean might enter. He took with him the commanders of hundreds, the nobles, the rulers of the people, and all the people of the land, and brought the king down from the temple of the Lord. They went into the palace through the upper gate, and seated the king on the royal throne. And all the people of the land rejoiced. But the city was quiet, because Athaliah had been slain with the sword. Joash was 7 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. He's only 7 years old. So he dies at 47, so he dies pretty early for a guy who had a 40-year-long reign. His mother's name was Zibiah. She was from Beersheba. Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years of Jehoiada the priest, which is kind of an indication that he's not going to do right once Jehoiada is gone, huh? Jehoiada chose 2 wives for him, and he had sons and daughters.